Viral Debrief. Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel, 7-4 Gear, is all about aviation. I appreciate all of you in the 7-4 crew for sending me these different videos to keep this series going. If you have a video that you want to see in Viral Debrief, the two easiest places to send them to me, my Instagram or the free forum, 74gear.com. Let's get into it. Well, that probably didn't go as planned. So there's obviously something I want to talk about. They had a tail strike there, but there's something that they do here that I see pilots do from time to time, and they shouldn't be doing it in these types of planes, and that's aerodynamic braking. They're leaving the nose up of the plane in order to use the wings to help slow the plane down. Flight school owners are probably going to be upset that I'm talking about this, but it's really not a useful skill unless you're flying a fighter jet or you're using a small plane at a flight school and trying to save the brakes. It's the skill that you learn in flight school. We get taught it in flight school, how to use aerodynamic braking, using those wings to help alleviate the stress that is on the brakes. You learn that there in your first year of flight school, and then you don't use it for the next 40-some years of your career. It's just not a good habit to get in, and here's why. This plane doesn't look like it has thrust reversers, and that's when the engines open up here and make that loud rumble when you land. The pilot has the nose of the aircraft up here while slowing down, and he has these things deployed up here. But if one goes up and the other one does not, the plane is going to want to pull to one side. The same applies with the thrust reversers. And as your aircraft slows down, the rudder becomes less effective. So then the only way to steer is with your nose wheel on the ground. That's how you steer on slower speeds. So if you have the nose up and then you start to get pushed off into the grass, you have no way to steer as you're slowing down unless you slam the nose down. So really the only reason that you're going to, in a commercial jet of course, keep your nose up like that is to look cool. Have I done that on any of my aircraft? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it's definitely not a habit you want to get into for that exact reason. If your thrust reversers, one side goes and the other doesn't, or if any of your speed brakes or any of those types of things, if part of it deploys and part of it doesn't, and you're too aggressive and you got your nose up, it may take a second before you realize what's happening. And now you're shooting off into the grass. Have to dump the nose over really hard. So now you're slamming the nose on the ground and then having to give an input in order to get the nose to do what you want to stay on the runway. There's no benefit in a commercial jet to keep your nose off the ground like that, unless you're trying to look cool, and that's fine until you shoot off in the grass, which always gives you a one-way flight to see the chief pilot. So besides doing the wheelie here and risking putting everyone in the grass, it appears they flared late and drove the gear into the ground and overflared. So combining all those things, it looks like they have a tail strike here and then risked another one as they moved along here, keeping the nose up off the ground. Now, I've never flown this aircraft, so I can't tell you what the flare is supposed to look like. On some aircraft, that it's better to actually have almost what looks like a flat landing. I don't know about this aircraft, but I can definitely assure you, you're never supposed to flare so much to have the tail strike or almost strike, which is what happened here. For those of you in flight school, I realize that landing and doing aerodynamic braking is something that you're going to have to learn, and it's something your flight school owners are going to want you to do. It's just not something you want to keep as a muscle memory once you get into a commercial aircraft, because it's not what it's designed to do. You're going to want to get the nose wheel on the ground safely and without slamming it over. You're going to want to get the nose on the ground, because as you start to slow down, that's how you're going to have to steer. Your rudder is going to have almost no impact after a certain speed. It's a really cool shot. Back. Nothing like off-roading your airline's aircraft to get a nickname. You never in aviation, unless you're a fighter pilot, want to have a nickname. This is a really good way to get known in your airline, and not for the right reason. So at this point, the pilot is basically lined up down the middle of the runway, maybe slightly to the right, but still in the middle overall. If you have to be on one side though, it's better to be cheating on the upwind side, so the wind will blow you into the middle of the runway once you touch down. But then you see the pilot make a bit of an aggressive move to the upwind side here. Now we're not going to talk about the aircraft floating or landing long. Here's why. With the winds really high, this is a small aircraft, you could land really far down the runway. And with the wind strong, sometimes you want to keep a little bit of power in. So forget about how far he landed. Let's just talk about the crosswind and what happened in that crab before they shot off into the grass. Now these pilots were fighting to get this plane onto the ground, and that's just part of flying a smaller aircraft like this. If you guys remember some of my past stories, I talked about PJ. He was that Vietnam era B-52 pilot that I flew small aircraft with down in South Texas. In South Texas, you get all kinds of stormy winds and all kinds of crazy stuff happens down there. I've flown into when hurricanes were coming, all kinds of crazy winds swirling, all kinds of different stuff. And so in a lot of those aircraft, you are just fighting with power and with your controls to get it and keep it lined up down the runway. So I know what it feels like to be in their situation. You'll notice here the pilot has now leveled off the plane and has pushed the rudder down to straighten the plane out. Now this is a bit high to do this because they are to the left of the runway. And if they just stayed like this, the wind will push them right into the middle of the runway. But you see, they let some of the rudder out because the nose is now pointing at the wind again, instead of going straight down the runway. Now this is something that I actually did as well. I would make a rudder correction to straighten the plane out, and then once it's straightened out, I would take my foot off the rudder. I don't know why I would do that. Like, I've made that correction and now I take it out. That's not how it works with the rudder on any aircraft. The only plane that you can make a small correction and then not make any more corrections is an Airbus. You can make a little correction and then the plane will now fly that correction. That doesn't work like that on any other plane. And I used to do it, and that's what it looks like here. It looks like they pushed the rudder in to straighten it out and then let the rudder out, and then it went right back to facing into the wind. I've done it before, I've just never gone into the grass. I know that it seems weird because I've talked about this before, but as your plane gets bigger, a lot of times it gets easier to fly. I know that's not really fair, but life's not fair. The pilot lands here and he side loads the landing gear of the plane, which isn't great, but obviously not terrible. It's just hard on the aircraft and uncomfortable for the passengers. But this is where having good muscle memory is very important. The pilot needed to keep his foot on the rudder and keep the plane going down the runway and keep the aileron into the wind. The aileron is here on the wing. That is what you use to steer the plane left and right. But as soon as he landed, he needed to turn this wing so it didn't get lifted up by the wind, which you see it happens here. As soon as all the wheels were down, it looks like the pilot let go all the inputs for the rudder and the controls. Now all these things that I'm explaining to you, I know them because I've messed them up in some form or the other. Like I talked about earlier, I've stepped on the rudder and let the rudder out. I forgot to put the aileron in and had the wing lift up. I've just never had anything go so bad that I wasn't able to correctly get it fixed before it got out of control. On a 747, I've talked about in a crosswind landing, if you don't put the aileron correction in, that wing will lift up and you can slap one of the engines from the other side down on the ground. These are very expensive engines. So it's just good to get that muscle memory, and sometimes you got to learn from bad experience and messing things up, which I've done pretty much everything that guy did except for shoot off in the grass. I've never done that. The easiest thing that I attribute this to is where the pilot feels the aircraft is on the ground and they mentally celebrate and they go, okay, I've completed what I needed to do of get this plane on the ground. But something that most guys learn around 14 or 15 or maybe 16, nobody wins when you prematurely celebrate. Just remember that. The reason this plane is still shooting towards the grass here is the weather vaning. The wind is hitting the tail of the plane, which is pushing it to go off to the side of the runway towards the wind. You have to counteract that by using the rudder to change the direction and get the nose wheel to steer you down the runway. That's why it's important to have the nose wheel on the ground very quickly. Had the pilot right here pushed on the rudder, he could have kept it on the runway. But instead, they weren't aggressive enough and they let it get into the grass. I don't know if they switched controls or what happened, but then it took them a long time to finally get back on the runway. I'm not sure why it took so long. I'm not sure if they were going around something. It doesn't really matter. Now, I've never done this before where I've gone off the runway, but I'm guessing that once you get back onto the runway and then stop, you look at each other and think, man, I hope that Kelsey doesn't post this on Viral Debrief. Dude, I remember seeing this on the news. It's just crazy when you think about it. This is in JFK, and I used to fly into JFK all the time, and Detroit all the time, and see these Delta 747s there, and I used to think, man, those are so cool. I wish one day I could fly those. And I honestly never thought that something would ever happen, that someone would make the mistake of letting me fly them, but here I am. So the first thing to notice here is this guy right here, running. You see how far he's running away? That's because from the flight deck, we're so far up, you have to be very far away for us to be able to see you. These are marshallers, so we're looking at them for indications of what we are supposed to be doing. Those marshallers have all kinds of different hand signals, starting your engine, setting your brakes, releasing your brakes, and they have all these different symbols, but the one that they tell you to stop and not move anymore is when they make an X. They'll cross their two wands and there will be an X. That X says, don't move. So those different signs that they make, that's what we're looking at when we're deciding what we're going to do until they hook up an audio jack. So with all those different signs, we're expecting them to make things. Now this footage is obviously really grainy, so I can't see exactly what he's doing with his hands. If he's saying set the brakes or what. But in this scenario, if he didn't want them to continue to move, what he would normally do, and what I see always that people do, is they just hold the X. They hold the X with their wands or their hands or something to let us know not to move. You would never have someone make a symbol, say stop, and then walk away, and then typically you're not, as a pilot, going to then move forward knowing that there's a tug that's under there or there's people that's under there. You're not going to be moving forward typically. I don't know what happened here as far as the signals, but I didn't see him waving. You know, they make this sign like this, which is continue to move forward. He started just walking away. So I'm not sure why the pilots decided to then move forward knowing that there's people all around there. So usually what you'd want to do there is flash your lights, wait for someone to plug up an audio jack or get in front of you or something, and then they're going to tell you, yes, you can move forward or shut down here, well, they're going to tow you in or whatever the situation is. But clearly, when that guy walked away, that was his mistake. And then the pilots made a mistake moving the aircraft forward without having anyone there signaling them to move forward. This guy should have stood there making the X so we on the flight deck can see what's going on. But he left, and they're not at the gate yet. They should have seen the tug go under the nose here, but I don't know where that tug came in from. They should have seen the tug go under the nose. So the pilots made a mistake by moving forward, but this guy now walks away, and I don't know why the pilots would think it's okay to move forward. That surprises me. The only time that I can imagine moving forward without a marshaller there is in some airports like, I want to say Sydney, I don't know, there's a bunch of them, but they had these digital marshalling things. Actually, I'm in Bahrain right now in the Middle East, and they have it here as well. And what it does is it tells you to keep moving forward. It gives you how far away you are from parking, and then it tells you to go left or right. So having something like that could give you a reason why they move forward. I don't think they have that in JFK. Maybe they do, but I don't think so. It looks like what was going to happen was the tug was going to hook up and then pull them into the gate, is what it looks like they were setting up to do, which I've had that happen. And what happens when you do that is you'll pull in and you'll stop and you'll shut down your engines. They're going to hook up an audio and they're going to say, shut down all your engines, we're going to hook up to you right now. So you won't shut down all your engines until you know you're not moving. And you're not going to know that you're done moving until they tell you, hey, you're done moving, we're going to hook up here. So I don't know why they didn't hook up and give that message to the flight deck, because that's what would have happened here. They would have said, we're going to tug you in this last, 10 feet or whatever it is. So go ahead and shut down your engines, and then you'll shut down your engines, and then they'll hook up your tug and they'll pull you. And that's how it would normally go in this situation. But that guy with the X would stand out there until he sees, and the guy on the ground that's talking to us, there's a little mic jack where that tug is. There's a little mic jack they plug in. And that guy would signal to the guy with the X, hey, we're speaking to them, you can go. Because obviously now that the pilots are talking to us, now that the pilots are talking to them, they know, okay, cool, this is all coordinated, they'll shut down the engines and now we can just go to the next stage. But clearly that wasn't communicated, so when that guy walked away, the pilots for some reason thought, oh, I'll just go this last 10 feet so we can go home. That's not how it worked out. This is kind of an interesting video. First, because you have flight students out there filming, so they obviously know what's going to happen. In most flight schools, the local tower or the local communications are getting broadcast into a portion of the flight school, and you have a bunch of flight students that are just kind of hanging out there. So in something like this, where the guy would probably be talking to tower and saying, hey, I can't get my landing gear to go down, can you talk to a mechanic? And they'll start coordinating all that. Once the pilots start hearing that this is going on, they're going to get all their pilot friends, and a bunch of pilots are going to run out and watch this and film it. And there's honestly not much else that they can do in this scenario, so I honestly would probably have done the same thing. But something that they did do, which I always kind of thought I would do if I was in this situation, so kudos to these pilots, is if you're in a situation where you're going to have to land and you're not going to be able to get the gear down, is to, as soon as you're assured that you're going to make the runway and have plenty of time, you want to kill the engine. You see how the propellers aren't moving? The reason they're not moving is because they've killed the engine. And the reason they've killed the engine is because if you land with the propellers spinning, it will damage the engine. But if you were to kill the engine before you land, it's going to damage the propeller, but the engine's not spinning the propeller into the ground, damaging the engine further. The skin of an airplane, meaning the belly of the airplane, is really cheap and easy to repair. And the propellers are also easy to repair. It's going to need an inspection and a few other things, but it's a lot cheaper than taking both those engines off, and you're going to have to just rip those apart and do a whole bunch of work to put them back together. That's an expensive, very complicated thing. But just doing this, all you got to do is fix the skin, fix the propellers, and the plane's just about ready to go. That thing could be up and flying within a couple of days, no problem, as soon as you got those pieces fixed. So the pilots and whoever suggested that they do this, they did the right thing, shutting down the engines. That saved the plane from needing a lot of extra repairs, and it looks like you landed right down the middle of the runway. Really good job. The unfortunate thing for this pilot is that for the rest of their career, they're gonna have an incident on their record. It probably won't be an accident, it will be an incident. And that's just determined by the amount of damage and a few other factors. But they're going to have that incident on their record. The good thing is they have the video here to show exactly what happened and show that under pressure they were able to shut down the engines, land down the middle of the runway. But every job application that they're going to have for the rest of their career, they're going to have to explain this particular incident, because it's going to be on their record. But they can show under pressure, I was able to remain calm, and as long as you spin anything, you can take something like this and spin it in a really positive way. Hey, we ran all the checklists, we couldn't get anything done. We coordinated with the mechanics, and they suggested that what we do is shut down the engine before landing. So I assured that we had plenty of distance and we were on the longest possible runway, and we ran through all those checklists, and then we shut down the engines before touchdown, and we landed and the plane was back flying in 48 hours. Now, if you said something like that in an interview, they're going to be like, great, yeah, you function under pressure, no big deal. This is not something that's going to typically be a penalty for you, but it will be something that they'll have to deal with for the rest of their career. If you want to see some pilots fighting with air traffic control who don't seem like they'd function well under pressure, check out this video here. And if you want to see something a bit funnier, check out this one up here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.